Okay, looks like we are live.
Okay.
What's up, Chris? How's it going?
It's going good. Should we do our clean intro?
We should do our clean intro.
Do you want to do it this time?
Sure. Hey, welcome to Why We Roll, the tabletop RPG game design podcast from the Stillfleet Studio. I'm Wythe Marschall,
I'm Chris Pickett, as always.
and we're coming live from New York City. We have a guest today, George Bickers, coming live from Manchester, United Kingdom.
Yeah, hi
What's up,
guys.
George?
Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, it's all good, all good. I mean, beyond battling the snow over here, this morning woke up, the world was blanketed with snow, which is making it very cold in my house. But other than that, I'm doing all good. Really happy to be here with you guys.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining. And as usual, listeners, if you're enjoying Why We Roll and our effort to try to bring you some of the best indie game design work that we can find and dig into some themes that we think are really interesting about genre and history and politics, but also really practical advice. How do you work as an indie TTRPG designer? And what are some sort of Venn diagram connection points between TTRPGs and other types of game design? Maybe you could head over to our Patreon. It's patreon.com/Stillfleet and support the show. We'd really appreciate it. And you could find everything we do at Stillfleet, including the games Chris and I are working on. But today we're here to talk about George's work. So we're going to hear all about Three Sales Studio and Mappa Mundi, the big new project coming out. So with that, George, do you want to do a little intro so we know sort of who you are? You give your take on yourself before we ask you any probing questions.
Yeah, no problem. I always look forward to probing questions. That's my favorite kind of question. Hi, everyone. I'm George. I'm George Francis Bickers. I am the studio lead at Three Sales Studios, based here in Manchester in the UK. We are a very studio lead is a fancy title that I gave myself. It's a very small 3-person team. It's myself as the studio lead and the lead designer, Jeremy Blum, who is American but now lives here in the UK, Taiwanese American guy from New Jersey, so not far from you guys originally, but he now lives over here in the UK. He is our developer and editor and my co-writer, and then we have Joel Kilpatrick, who is our miraculously talented artist who we're incredibly lucky to have, and the three of us own Three Sales Studios together, so we're a kind of collectively owned, working class led, largely neurodivergent business. And Mappa Mundi is our first game. We've been working on it. I came up with the concept originally in April 2020. Oh my God, we're in 2025 now, aren't we? So I came up with it originally April 2023. April 23. We started working on it pen to paper, properly pen to paper in terms of like hardcore design stuff. Kind of September, October of 2023, and we are launching on Kickstarter in 29 days from the day that we're recording, which is January 5th, which means that we're launching Kickstarter February the 4th. So yeah, that's a little basic overview for who we are and what we're up to at the moment.
No, that's great. I mean, I've been following along with Mappa Mundi for a minute now. I'm very excited about the game. I think it looks really cool.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah. I mean, I think just anything that isn't super fighty feels good right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And this is quite the opposite. I mean, there's literally no combat rules. So yeah, the opposite of fighty.
Yeah. Well, maybe for, just to expand a little bit for those who don't know, could you tell us more about Mappa Mundi?
Yeah, 100%. So Mappa Mundi is it's subtitled an exploration and ecology RPG. So the purpose of the game is that you play as chroniclers who are basically adventure academics. You've been trained by the Mappa Mundi Institute in your local region. In a parallel version of our own world, and you are trained. You've been trained to go out to reconnect this world that has been kind of sundered, split, torn apart, isolated from itself internally by 100 years of ecological catastrophe that the people in the world call the flux. And basically, what the flux has done is it's divided the world's continents from one another, and it's divided the regions within those continents from one another as well. So for 100 years, essentially, you've had kind of regional cross-cultural isolation, enforced isolation happening. And this is a world that, like I said, it's a parallel version of our own world, but one of the things that makes it different is that there are monsters and creatures about, who kind of live out in most places, live out in the wilds beyond the kind of bounds of human society, but not in all cases. And the Mapamundi Institute has trained you as chroniclers, so the players as chroniclers has trained you to be the first people to go out into the world after 100 years of this ecological catastrophe and basically write the new story of the world. So it's history, it's biology, it's geography, it's ecology. And you do that primarily by going out and finding these monsters. But as we said, it's the opposite of fighty. So instead of fighting these monsters, the kind of gameplay loop is to encounter the monsters and reveal their kind of 8 unique behaviors. And by doing that, you learn about the monsters and you can kind of work better to protect them, work better to kind of keep them, keep their habitats intact, and to kind of ensure the continued or restore the balance between kind of human and monster culture, society, balance, habitat, that kind of thing.
It's like a non-violent monster hunter.
It's so literally in the pre-release guide that we made available back in April 2024, in the inspiration section, it says the Monster Hunter series, but in brackets, but turned upside down.
Yeah.
Because that, like, those games, man, like, it's like the way that I've described them to people who haven't played them before is like, oh yeah, so basically you go out and find the last monster of its kind and then you make it extinct.
Yeah, and then you murder it.
Yeah, you murder it, make it extinct, and harvest it for parts to make the economy work. And I was like, I don't like that. Like, what can I do that's the complete opposite of that, but still involves that kind of monster hunting in inverted commas practice? That's where that's largely where Mapamundi came from.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's more like the new thing with bird watching being like an engine of game design. Like, you just observe things and you don't kill them, which I think is like so unnatural for gamers.
Like, this shouldn't be like as profoundly radical as it is, right? Like, what do you mean I don't kill it? You saw it with its young. Like, are you sure you want to hurt it? Yeah, I want to kill it, and maybe the young as well. No, absolutely not. We're going to move away from that.
Right. So, I mean, and it's funny, we've been watching the Conan O'Brien travel show, and I can hear the inner Conan O'Brien voice when you were like, and there's no rules for combat, being like, okay, immediately ask him about combat. Immediately ask him about combat. But instead of doing that, I'll say, so, Vex in the chat, hi Vex, says, sounds like Monster Care Squad, but a more classic fantasy and a slightly older audience. And I definitely got some vibes of that reading through it. But one reason I was somewhat more interested personally in this than Monster Care Squad is it seemed like the rules were more interesting and just existed than in Monster Care Squad. So, maybe we could move from the
hot take.
Have you read that one? Have you read the book?
Yeah. So I really like Monster Care Squad. I discovered Monster Care Squad after I started designing Mapamundi. And at first I was like, I was talking to a friend. I don't know if you guys know him, Daniel Kwan from Asians Represent podcast. So I was talking to Daniel and I presented the idea of Mapamundi to me. He's like, oh, that's a bit like Monster Care Squad. And I was like, oh, Jesus, like someone's already done it. And I went out and immediately bought Monster Care Squad and read it. And I was like, okay, like we're standing on ground that they charted, and then we're taking it further and we're going in a different direction. But yeah, I love Monster Care Squad. Evidently, Wythe and I have slightly different takes on it.
Well, my question was, I definitely don't think that game has rules that work. So my question, your game does. So that was really my
Thank you. That's reassuring to hear. 30 days now.
More fun to play. So, could you tell us a little about like how you play the game? Like,
of course,
absolutely. The rules. Yeah.
So in the pre-release guide, we had to get the pre-release guide out. I say we had to. It was a kind of an internal deadline, but we wanted the pre-release guide available in the weeks running up to the UK Games Expo here in the UK. So UK Games Expo is always the last weekend in May. We wanted at least a month of kind of having the pre-release guide out to promote. And the way we've decided to do things with 3 Cell Studios generally is that we give people essentially the entire game for free as part of the pre-release guide. So the pre-release guide contains all of the rules that you need, one of the 10 regions, and a pre-written adventure, and all 4 character types. It doesn't give you all of the skills and all of the what we call specializations and endorsements, the kind of the character progression, but it gives you everything you need. Like, technically speaking, you wouldn't ever have to buy the game. But we were getting it out quite quickly. Mapamundi is our first project, like as an independent studio. We've worked on other people's stuff before as writers and artists, but like this was our first project. And I also had to learn to do layout in 2 weeks. So the pre-release guide gets better as it goes in terms of layout, because I started at page 1 and finished at page 101. So the rules are a little like the rules are tight. The rules are in there. This is the version that you two have both seen, and I'm glad you think they work. The order of information isn't necessarily great, but that's now much better for the final version. So the final version of the game, the rules fit on 6 pages of a 220-page book. So like we call the game, it's, narrative first, rules light, but the rules are robust enough to actually be there and actually be something that's kind of reliable on. So Mapamundi is, you have narrators who are our version of GMs, because we don't do masters in 3-cell studios. For those watching the show, I'm kind of wearing my political colors as usual. So narrators are there to facilitate the game. They are there to take part in this collaborative storytelling exercise that all RPGs are. But they don't have to roll any dice. Narrators don't have to roll dice. Players have 4 dice, which range from D4 to D6 to D8 to D12. You have 4 abilities: exploration, observation, traversal, and deduction. And we figured that everything you need to do in a world can roughly be boiled down into one of those 4 things. So traversal is how you move through the world. Observation is how you see the world. Deduction is how you understand and question the world. And exploration is the drive to put all those things into action. So the game works in 3 phases. You have the research phase, the journey phase, and the exploration phase. And I'm just currently reaching for my journey deck here. So in the research phase, this is your kind of more typical standard, RPG. It's very familiar to everyone else. You go into a town or a village, you talk to NPCs, you gather information about your target. Your target is almost always a monster, but can be like a big cultural event that might be happening. You gather information, and while you're doing that, the narrator is building a set of these cards. Now, these are our journey cards. They're tarot-sized cards, and they represent the landscapes and the wilds. There's also one of each of our 30 monsters in the final journey deck as well, because they come at the end of the journey deck. So as you are discovering things about your target and about the wilds that you're going to have to travel through and about its habitat, the narrator is building a set of these cards. But I don't know if you saw, but they are radially symmetric. So it's actually the same piece of artwork up and down, but colored and toned differently. And the idea is that if you do find something out, it's going to go in what we call right-wise, so the right way up. And if you don't find something out, or you miss a kind of crucial piece of information, it's going to go in inverted. And so once the research phase finishes, you go into the journey phase, and the narrator starts to reveal these cards one at a time. You play through your journey through the wilds. I couldn't very well make a game that had exploration in its subtitle and not have travel be what it quite often can be, which is you leave place A, you turn up in place B 5 days later. Oh no, you got attacked by goblins. So you have to play through these, you play through these landscapes. If they're right-wise, you're going to be having a better time. If they're inverted, you're going to be having a worse time. There'll be challenges to overcome, things that can go wrong. And then once you've done that travel, once you've completed that deck that your actions have constructed, you then come to the encounter phase, which is where you come face to face with your target, which, like I said, is usually a monster. And these can be like, it's easy to think about these like boss battles, right? But instead of trying to remove HP, you are trying to uncover behaviors. And you do that through a mix of skills and what we call interactions, which are kind of specific, they're kind of actions that you take that only really work with monsters and targets. And you use those to prompt a behavior to emerge, and then you record that behavior. What ties Mapamundi together is my favorite mechanic, and it's something that we're very proud of having kind of codified, but we are by no means the first people to notice or use this. And that mechanic is called shaping. So any TTRPG table where the players have a modicum of creative control, they will be engaging in shaping. what shaping is for us is it's the ability for players to take creative control, like the majority of creative control over the game. One of our playtesters described it as adding flavor text to the world. So, for example, let's say I'll bring up another one of these cards. This card is the waterfall. So you come to the waterfall, and let's say we're in the Leknitsa region of our world, which is a kind of equivalent to Eastern Europe. I as the narrator, will give you a kind of brief overview of what a waterfall in that part of the world might look like, and we've provided a lot of this information in the book as well. But then what I do is I will pass it out to the table and ask them to engage in shaping. And so I will say, Wythe, let's say we start with you, and I say, Wythe, what does your character see? What do you see? What do you see, smell, hear, taste? What can you touch? What's the weather like? Is there anything living in there? What's the plant life about? And you might give me
waterfall, eels, lilacs, gently snowing.
All right, I love this. So you've given me a couple of words. You might also have given me a sentence or a paragraph, even just a feeling or an emotion. And so then I'll weave that into what I've given as a baseline. And then I'd pass it over to Chris and say, Chris, can you give me more detail? Can you zoom in? Can you zoom out? Can you have you seen something that Wythe hasn't seen, or have you seen a different thing, and all those kinds of things? And then you get to add that in as well.
Nice. Yeah, the eels have small parasites that... I don't know. It's too early.
But what you've done there is you've both engaged in that act of shaping.
I saw more eels.
I saw more eels, and they've got parasites on them. But like what you've done is you have created meaning and life in that world that I hadn't put in there. But my job as the narrator is to carry that forward throughout the rest of the session. Is to remember those things. And when you come to, let's say you move from the waterfall to the river or to a pond or a lake or something like that, then I might introduce that by saying, oh, it looks like this might be where the eels spawn, or here's all these flies, that might be what those parasites are. And then we continue on. So Mapamundi, the narrator's role in Mapamundi is like the prime mover, is to start things off and then to build a kind of foundation or a bare structure and allow the players to bring that world to life. And like I said, good RPG tables have been doing this for years. We've just formalized it as a mechanic. And by formalizing it, everyone becomes immediately more comfortable adding their own creativity to the world without feeling like they're stepping on anyone's toes, because you've been instructed to do it by the game. The game has created and held that space for you to do that. So that's briefly, which wasn't very briefly, but that's how Mapamundi works. It's like I said, narrative first, rules light, 4 dice. You don't level up your characters, you level up your dice. So we have EXP, but our EXP is not experience, it's expertise. So as you gain expertise and you gain in training, your dice level up from D4 to D6 to D8 to D12. Like I said, 1 dice is associated with each of the 4 abilities. And so the idea is that when you first set out on your journey, you're not going to be able to free climb a cliff, because that would probably require, abstractly thinking, would require a D12, and you've only got a D4 in traversal. But as you climb some hills, maybe scrabble up some scree slopes, and you start to gain your expertise and you level up your dice, you become more capable of doing difficult things. Because these are, in Mapamundi, the chroniclers, they're just normal people. They're normal human beings who have volunteered to do a job in a dangerous situation and putting themselves in personal danger in order to do these kind of miraculous things. And I like expertise more than I like experience in that sense. And that's also how you kind of gain skills that way as well, by both succeeding in and failing at using your skills. You gain more points to spend, because we learn as much from failing as we do from succeeding, or in our case, you learn half as much from failing as you do from succeeding. You need half as many failures as you need successes to level up, to kind of level up in inverted commas and unlock more skills along our skill paths, for which each of our 4 licenses, i.e. character classes, have 1.
Nice. That's
yes.
You covered a lot of ground there. Recap: very much player empowering, and players are all humans in this world, exploring this world, defining the sort of non-human animal, plant, fungal, other beings who inhabit it. One question: Are there intelligent non-humans, or is that something
Absolutely, yeah. Most of the monsters. So one of the things that Mapamundi has at its core is a respect for the non-human world, be that animal, mineral, or arboreal. Yeah, trees and plants. And so almost, I would say, all of our monsters. The militant vegan in me comes out and sits there and says that actually all humans are animals, and animals are non-human persons. Everything has its own degree of personhood, and we largely have ignored that in the West and exported that kind of attitude around the world. So our monsters and creatures, but also our landscapes, are considered to be non-human persons who have rich inner lives in their own right. They have degrees of sentience that we might not understand, but they are always treated and considered to be as non-human persons. And so that is more apparent in some monsters than it is in others. For example, in the pre-release guide, we have a giant snail, a 50-foot tall giant snail called the Helix carcole, who has a forest on its back. And that kind of gastropod sentience intelligence is quite difficult for humans to understand, because there is a good degree of separation there, like evolutionarily. But that doesn't mean there isn't sentience there. Whereas some of our monsters can talk. They can literally talk and engage in conversations with human beings. Be that, some of them are talking verbally, some of them are talking telepathically. And so that kind of sentience is easier to kind of verify and understand. So 100%, to answer the question, 100%, there is non-human kind of sentience and agency here.
It's super interesting.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Wythe.
I was just going to ask, how much your, I'm a pescatarian now. I was a vegetarian for many years. Mm-hmm. And I wonder how much of that is in the book versus it's the foundation, but it's not said explicitly. And I also wonder how that influences your thoughts on speculative, basically political economy. Are the people in your book also vegetarian? Are there many people who do kill animals? And then it's a question of your role, because even looking at the site, you have these kinds of directions that, you've taken an oath, right, to do no harm to the land. But sort of how do you, where does harm come into play at the level of, game design, both in world building and then mechanically when you're talking about animals? So it's one thing to say there's no combat rules, but how does sort of eating meat work in this speculative political economy? That
is a very, very, very interesting question, and one I'm really happy you asked. So it's not in the world of Mapamundi. So the world is called ecumeny. It means the inhabited world. The continent that the core game takes place on is called Ivasu. So it's our version of Eurasia, but also North Africa as well, which is technically on the continent of Ebulan, but it's been cut off at what is the equivalent of the Sahara by the flux. That's where the divide has occurred during the flux. In this world, killing monsters, and monsters are kind of very, very rare. We only cover 30 of them in the core book, whereas we cover 50 creatures. So there's 3 monsters for each region, 5 creatures for each region. In the game world, it is considered the ultimate taboo to kill monsters. However, like all ultimate taboos, people still try to do those things. Most people don't, but some people do. The idea of meat eating in Mapamundi is kind of addressed insofar as we briefly mention it in one of our cultures or one of our regions, that hunting of monsters and hunting of creatures and animals and also animal husbandry does take place on a kind of relatively limited scale. It's not industrial farming as we would understand it now. It does take place, but to take a life for sustenance is considered a kind of acceptable thing to do, providing that is done, and I'm going to use in inverted commas here, as ethically as possible. So there are kind of taboos around there's taboos around killing in general, animal or human. There's taboos around ecological destruction or ecocide, generally speaking, but not everyone conforms to those things. Different regions and different cultures will have different understandings of those taboos. We're not trying to be kind of culturally homogenous with it. In terms of like my own kind of animal rights and agricultural politics, like that's the foundation of this game, but it's not everyone in this world is a vegan, for example. Like people have different, in exactly like our world, people have different ways of doing things, but it leans more towards what I would want to see rather than what we have now, which is, brutal industrial agriculture and farming, which hurts both animals and humans in equal measure. It's kind of like Mapamundi and the idea, and again, like that idea of the oath to do no harm. Mapamundi chroniclers are swearing that oath. They wouldn't have to swear that oath if the whole world had already, if the whole world already thought it.
Right.
You wouldn't have to swear that oath, right? People fight, people die. The world is it's not some kind of pacifist utopia. A lot of our regions have either been imperial powers or are in a kind of post-colonial position. And so it's not kind of this flag waving hippie dream world. It's it's much closer to our kind of it's much closer to our world than that would imply, but a kind of slightly more ideal. It's the other direction. Our world took one fork in relation to animals and agriculture and the environment. The world of Mapamundi has taken another one.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, especially because it becomes less fantasy and more speculative fiction in a way.
Yeah. That's how I would describe Mapamundi. Like it has the kind of it has fantastical trappings, but it's still. I mean, my design philosophy and the 3 Cell Studios motto is the real world done fantastically. So. All of our games either take place in the real world or in a very, very close approximation. So Mapamundi is the latter of those two. And I would absolutely describe it as a kind of speculative fiction rather than fantasy, but it carries that. If you look at it, it looks like a fantasy game.
Yeah,
and that was a kind of
so.
intentional choice. I like subverting people's expectations. You look at Mapamundi, it might look a bit like D&D or Pathfinder. You open up the cover and you're like, oh, no combat. Okay. Expectations subverted. With you've drawn someone in with the like, this looks like the games you're familiar with, and then the fundamental thing that those games do, which is allow you to kill things, has been taken away, and that opens up this whole new world of possibilities. So speculative rather than fantasy is definitely how I would look at it.
Yeah. It's I don't know. I keep on thinking Wythe and I are big fans of this series, The Children of Time books by Adrian Tchaikovsky, and there's kind of some similar currents that run through it, but that's like such far future science fiction that it's almost easier to imagine some of the changes that happen in that book. Whereas with Mapamundi, you look at it and it, the cover looks like a 5e supplement or thing, but that's just the trappings of it. Which I do
the
think
fundamental
is really
conceit is entirely different, and like it masks its radicalness under the guise of, look, this is something you're familiar with, which I think is a good thing. People are looking for that familiarity when they're looking for a new game, and that's great. I don't want to make them uncomfortable, but comfortable in that uncomfortability. Do you know what I mean? People change when they're made to be uncomfortable, or people enjoy things differently when they're on uneven ground. It's not just repetitive and, oh no, I get it, this is just another 5e hack or another 5e clone or whatever. It's doing something fundamentally different.
Right.
But has made you feel comfortable enough to make that leap with us.
Yeah, we talk about that on the show. People talk about it in business, the Pareto principle, like 80-20, like 80% of the product needs to be familiar and 20% needs to be innovative. And I don't think the numbers really matter, but that idea that there has to be some familiar affordance, something that people can grok, easily as a game player when we're designing games. And there has to be some sort of innovation, some reason to not just play Magic or Dominion or D&D or Pathfinder or whatever it is that is the sort of dominant thing that people are aware of. So I think here, at the level of visual design, you're actually, I also think Vex had a good point. You're harkening back to more classic eras of fantasy with the visual design, because looking at Mapamundi, there's a lot of sort of little illustration bits, or the vignetting that is meant to recall, I think, somewhat medieval illuminated manuscripts, somewhat early modern Age of Sail, sextant based, charts for seafaring. But in any event, it sort of recalls an earlier time and sort of Western visual regimes. But then, as you say, it's not really totally about any of those things. So it's not really about doing the colonialism like some older RPGs and especially board games explored. And some continue to, and it's not about combat like D&D. It's kind of, it's actually about more something akin to like a Pokemon, but obviously again, inverted in terms of the relations with the animals. So it's sort of interesting how those genres collide. And I also was just looking at the maps further down, on the page about Mapamundi, because I'd seen what was in the earlier book, but hadn't noticed, like, you have these different regions, and I presumably have different sort of rules, different animals that live there, different creatures, I should say. But some of them look very similar. I mean, especially Tia Hakim looks very similar to the Arabian Peninsula.
So it literally is the Arabian Peninsula. So like the maps are our continental map, our map of Ivasu and northern Ebulan is beyond taking away the Iberian Peninsula and Italy and some of the Greek islands and places like that. It is almost identical to real life Eurasia and North Africa. Obviously it's scaled down, the scale is slightly different, but like these regions are mapped onto real world regions. And as a consequence, it was incredibly important for us because this is like who we are, is a working class led studio who are trying to do as best as we can to make an anti-colonial game. Again, subverting those expectations. This is not a game where white Western Europeans go to places where people have lived for thousands of years and say, hey guys, look at what I just discovered. Like it's resolutely not that game. So in the pre-release guide, there is only one of the 10 regions, but that's not the starting region. It's just the one that we had done first. In the final game, you can start in and or being from any of those 10 regions. It's not white Western Europeans going over to the Far East or to the Middle East or South Asia or wherever and being like, hey guys, we're here to discover all the things you already know. It's an exploration. Crucially, it's exploration and not discovery. You are exploring things that might be unknown to you and things that have changed because of these 100 years of ecological catastrophe. But it's not a discovery game, it's an exploration game.
Just to follow up, could you say a little about how much this is supposed to be basically Earth versus not Earth? Because I mean, we've talked about the political economy aspect vis-a-vis meat eating, but I mean, just looking at the maps, like if there are areas that are meant to be very similar to real world cultures, societies, geographical features. I mean, is that something that again, you wanted to give people those affordances, as Vex points out, in software, it's called intuitive design, that idea of giving people things they might know versus, no, it's just kind of a gotcha where it looks similar, but actually it's very, very different. If you
so it's more close to being true than it is to being a gotcha. Now, we have done, the final book is 220 pages long. Our regional guides take up 100 pages of that. So 10 pages for each region, but those include the bestiaries as well. So actually the writing that defines those regions is quite short. And so we have had to take shortcuts. Shortcuts is the wrong word. We've had to include some things and exclude others. So for example, one of our regions, Fuondi, is Southeast Asia. Now, there are a lot of countries in Southeast Asia that we have not been able to represent all of them fully, kind of culturally, not been able to represent those cultures fully in the word limits we have. So what we've had to do is kind of emphasize some and de-emphasize others. But to build on Vex's point about intuitive design, what we are trying to do is give you a cup that is a quarter full and allow you narratively to fill it yourself. We provide blank maps. So in the book, the maps are all filled in, but we provide blank maps of each region for players to download to map their own versions of those continents. There is no, in inverted commas, official geography for this world. We have provided in the book, essentially we're providing narrators with a kind of official, again, in inverted commas, geography and framework for each of these regions. So they're not just lost when they start off. It gives them a kind of touchstone to start off with. But actually, it's the players who are leading this world building process. Like Mapamundi is fundamentally a game about players building their own version of the world, which is why we had all the blank maps as well.
Yeah, I was going to say the blank maps feel like an echo of the shaping mechanic that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Or like games like A Quiet Year, like games where we
Right.
don't know exactly what the world is. We know that through gameplay we'll define aspects of it. So here you're saying, okay, picture Earth, so it's that 80-20 intuitive bit, but you're going to be filling it in actually as opposed
but
to,
actually that 80-20
right.
is kind of like the 20% is like this like the Earth is it's broadly geographically familiar. The rest of it is up to you. Now, again, the cultures that we've chosen to include, we have worked with cultural consultants on 6 of our 10 regions to ensure that as close as possible in a fantastical setting and also a kind of global medieval period. Now, everywhere went through an equivalent of a medieval period, even if it's at different times, but we're kind of taking those as kind of generic time points or as general time points. We've worked with cultural consultants to ensure that as close as possible, we are doing this respectfully and honestly and with sensitivity. And there have been times where we got it wrong. Like Garu Goma is our version of South Asia. This was the one that we struggled the most with. So Jeremy and I wrote the 10 regional guides, and I will come back to this in a minute in terms of how we would have wanted to do it had this not been our first project. But Jeremy and I wrote all of our regional guides. I wrote 4, he wrote 6. Jeremy is Taiwanese American, so he started with Zomong, which is our kind of version of Greater China, which is one of the now ex-imperial powers in the game. He started with Zomong. I started with Domolov, which is equivalent to kind of Central Europe and Germany. And we ultimately met in the middle. But Garu Goma, the first draft, we were both quite happy with it. And then we worked with our cultural consultant and he was like, guys, this is like crazy culturally homogenous. He's like, India, broadly speaking, or like the South Asia has never been like this. You need to go back and rework on this. And so Jeremy and I took the time, took a couple of days to digest the feedback and the comments. Jeremy went away, wrote a new version of it, built the feedback in, and now suddenly Garu Goma looks very different to how it did before and is now closer to what South Asia is actually, what kind of has actually been like. So like there have been times where we've got it wrong, but this is why it is so fundamental to work with people who have that lived experience or have that historical and cultural knowledge, because they tell you when your ass is showing. Do you know what I mean? When you've done something completely unintentionally, but you've done something ignorant or Orientalist or whatever it might be, they let you know that, and then you can fix it. Like it's not getting something wrong by mistake is not a problem. That's not something people should be punished for. But getting something wrong by mistake and then not doing anything about it, that is a problem. Not checking your ignorance, not checking your understanding, or going blindly ahead when someone has checked you, there's a problem with that. But actually there's no problem with just getting something wrong because you didn't know better. The thing to do is to make sure you don't do it again. And we do that by working with cultural consultants. Had this not been our first project and wasn't being funded essentially entirely out of my own pocket, we would have hired writers from those regions or with lived experiences of those regions to write them initially, and then we would have done the editing. Unfortunately, that cost way more money than we had available. But what we did do right from the start was like, this is our cultural consulting budget. It cannot be touched by any other part of the process. If more needs to go in there, more needs to go in there, and we'll do that. So literally from day one, we were like beginning to identify who we wanted our cultural consultants to be. And we've worked really closely with all of them. And it's been a really excellent process. And a vital one. Like it's literally the bare minimum. Like the better thing to do, like I said, would have been to hire writers from those regions. But we weren't and that's our kind of practice going forward, because fingers crossed Mapamundi is going to sell well enough for it to allow us to do that and to do expansions. But for the time being, the best we could do was to work with those cultural consultants and build their feedback in. And we're kind of proud to have done that.
Yeah, no, that's great. We I do think that's the economic bit is quite real,
Yeah, it's very
and also
real.
knowing who's out there and whom to find and how do you how do you engage folks as writers and as editors and as cultural consultants. So it's great that you had a thoughtful process at all, frankly.
Yeah.
And then it sounds pretty thoughtful, to be honest. Yeah, to your point about acknowledging what you would do ideally in an ideal world. I mean, that's great to have a plan kind of for the future at Telos. I mean, I know, Chris, we've talked about a budget for hiring a necromancer to resurrect Byzantine and Ottoman scholars to help us with your books, but
no, it's hard to find the.
They don't come cheap nowadays.
No, they don't come cheap.
Yeah, well, and I mean, it's
finding,
like finding the body of Oron Kasi and resurrecting.
Yeah,
like it's just
but
it's a lot,
finding like current scholars who speak languages has at least been for us. I know that was great to meet people like even at PAX who were able to help us with language. So George, again, that's great that you've built that in. And yeah, that is the danger with touching the real world. I mean, that is why. I mean, we've talked about it, Chris, with your book as well. Like why games avoid the real world like crazy.
It's easy. Yeah, it's easier, right? You like. So,
it is easier.
My take on it is that like the real world is so endlessly fascinating. Like I don't need elves and orcs and dwarves and there's so many stories in this world at this time and all other times, past and future, that are so rich for inspiration and so amazingly varied that like I don't need the fantasy to do that. Sometimes we have to make things fantastical, right? But the world again has always been fantastical. We in a way like we live in kind of maybe the most and least imaginative era we've ever lived in. Like, I can walk into, I carry a computer in my pocket that I can pay for things in the shop with. Like we're living in the future, but we've also kind of lost a lot of our kind of imaginaries that sustained us as cultures for so long. Or certainly we have like here in the UK, like the imaginaries of what we were and what we are and like the various Englands that have existed or the various United States that have existed, right? Everyone has different views and takes on that. There are parallel versions of our world exist in our current world because we all understand things differently. That's the space creatively that I want to be playing in, as well as like from a gaming perspective, that's the space I want to be playing in as well. I want to see this world explored and understood and made strange or made fantastical or healed or broken. That's what really motivates me as a designer. Hence the kind of the motto, the real world done fantastically.
Yeah, I mean,
but it is risky.
It's very risky.
And
it's difficult, but I agree. I also find our own world and our own history so endlessly fascinating, and I think something I've been thinking about a lot lately is just like, well, I care about this world. Like I have to live in this world. Yeah. And like I still want spaces of play and spaces of imaginaries and all of that good stuff that comes with TTRPGs, but I have to care about this world. So I should probably try to think through other possibilities for how we can live in this one.
And that's it, right? That for me, that is the essence of play. It's about exploring other possibilities. Yeah. And so when we were talking earlier about this, the question of like meat eating in Mapamundi, it's the same world. We just took different forks.
Right.
Our current world took the fork where the exploitation of animals on a mass scale and the people that kind of rear and kill and process and package and cook those animals is perfectly commonplace. But actually, if you take a step back from it, it's psychopathic. Like in a different culture, that's entirely psychopathic, right? The billions and billions of lives lost to to not even feed the world very efficiently is taken even slightly strange, is completely psychopathic.
Well, especially with climate, it's totally
psychopathic.
I mean, even if you putting aside arguments about eating meat ethically in terms of animal harm, when you look at just the damage to the planet, which is the source of all of the, it doesn't make any sense to your point.
And so it just by Mapamundi being like, okay, people do still eat meat. People have always eaten meat. People used to eat meat in a far more sustainable fashion. Some people still do. Yeah. Like, Mapamundi is not saying you all have to be vegan to play this game. I don't care. I don't care what you do on a kind of individual level, right? But Mapamundi is doing that thing of showing it's this world, except we took this direction rather than that one. and look at how fundamentally different that is.
It's
for
interesting.
Something as simple as a simple decision along those lines.
Yeah, it's interesting thinking about that in terms of time versus kind of alternate space at the same time. Like in in Stillfleet, it feels fantastical, but it is canonically this world just in the future. And it just happens to be I've gotten like a message from the future on my computer or whatever, right? And then Chris's game is kind of this world, but in the past, where then there's a sort of like your world of branching off. And so you're looking at kind of some sort of high medieval era where the world goes in a slightly different direction. And it went earlier in a different direction because the names are different, but sort of who cares? It's sort of Earth, but skewed. And I think those are different spaces of play that allow for different kinds of game design in terms of how much the player is engaged and in what way they're engaged with. To Chris's point, like what feels real and motivating. Like I think in a survival type game, like an OSR horror combat heavy game like Danse Macabre, the thing you're asking people to really think about is like you don't want to die, right? It's the zombie apocalypse thing. Everything is trying to kill you. You have to survive. In a game with no combat on the other end, like Mappa Mundi, you're engaging with the real through these questions of care for ecology, for ecosystems. And then in Stillfleet it's somewhere in the middle. It's like you're engaging with things through real feelings of like spite against your horrible manager and generally the systems of power that force you to spend time and energy and really put your body at risk to earn money that feels very silly and pointless. And those are
almost like any job I've ever had.
Exactly.
It turns out.
And I feel like each of these games, it's like you're trying to craft these to fit together. So you have this conception of what the game is about, and then you need to make rules that kind of get the player to feel those things while having a lot of fun.
So that's a really interesting point. So I'd be interested to hear your guys' take on this. I imagine you're very similar to me. So I'm a theme first designer. I come up with an idea. The Mappa Mundi was, you mentioned Pokemon earlier on. I had a dream, and I woke up from the dream, and I turned over to my partner, and I was like, "Babes, TTRPG idea. It's Pokemon, but your point is not to become Pokemon champion, but to do what the actual point of the game, which it judges you on, which is to complete the Pokedex, but it's in the medieval period." And she's like, "Okay, that sounds good." And I immediately got up and ran into this office. And started writing the idea down. But so I am theme first. I have to build the theme out and then I make rules and mechanics to fit the theme. I'm like, right, okay, this is how the game feels. This is what I want it to do. How do I now bring that to life mechanically? How do I give it its heart? I've designed its heart. How do I make that heart beat? I've designed its brain. How do I give the brain electrical signals? How do I make its limbs move? So kind of it's kind of the Frankenstein way, Dr. Frankenstein way of doing things. Build the body and then make the body work. That's kind of my theme first approach to it. But I don't know I kind of imagine you guys are probably similar, but
yeah. Chris, do you want to take that first?
Yeah. No, I'm definitely idea theme first when it comes to writing stuff. I mean, I think Danse Macabre is interesting because it's gone through a few different mechanical iterations, but I think at its core, it's always had the same kind of story. I think, I don't want to speak for Wythe, but for me at least, it's it's about the potential narratives that people can tell within the setting, and also just being excited about the setting is kind of where a lot of it comes from for me. So mechanics always follow, the idea.
It's like a pendulum for me, I think. Yeah. It's I start off all the way on theme, and then I go once that's established, I go all the way to mechanics to be like, right, how do I make the theme work? And then once I've got the mechanics, I then go back and revisit the theme to make sure everything's marrying up properly. So it's that iterative process. It's not like one, then the other, oh, now we're done.
Right.
It's that pendulum, and eventually it finds that point in the middle, and now you're like, the game's done. Now it works.
Well, I think one way to break this down more is to think in terms of game design. Instead of theme, there's the level of the exogenous, what are people doing to have fun? There's the endogenous, what are the rules telling me mechanically? How do I win or advance or whatever? What does the game want me to do mechanically? And then there's the diegetic, what is the world of the game? And I think I see a lot of designers focus a lot on the diegetic. They have hundreds of pages of lore. They sort of are writing novels about their world.
Yeah.
And or they have some exogenous sense of the vibe they want from when they started playing D&D as kids and it was fun, which are both fair and fun activities to do. Playing the big games and writing your novel are both fun and fair, but I think that middle level which I link, like Chris brought up, my favorite word is like narrative structure. Like, what is the game loop that you want players to go on? What is the journey that you think is repeated? Because in it,
and you should be able to write that down,
yes,
right?
Yes,
at some point, I'd be like, the earlier in the process, the better. Also bearing in mind that you need to be able to iterate on it and it will change. You need to write that loop down. What is it that I'm trying to have the players do? And that should be narrative with mechanic. What I do is I write the narrative bit in black, and then I write the mechanics in between it in red. This is what I want them to do, and this is how I have them do it. And then I go back to that at different points in the process to make sure it's up to date.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good idea. I think writing it down at any point is great, and especially even if you get like one paragraph, or if you can do it in bullets or whatever. Like, what are those loops? What are the key points of that loop? Because I think, you could do it for and I always challenge designers who haven't thought this way. Like, you could do it for any game. Like, you could do it for D&D. Like, generally those books are written to have a certain narrative loop where you go out, kill goblins, bring gold back to Waterdeep, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
And you might use different,
and then do it again,
and then do it again,
and again, and again.
And there's that's kind of it. And there's plenty of other stuff that's possible, but I mean, that is kind of the loop built in the game. That's what the rules generally reference. So I think it's different to challenge yourself to sort of, not that, again, I mean, our games, Chris and I made games with combat that are fairly sort of combat forward in a certain sense. But I mean, they're not about combat, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a really important thing, right? Because D&D at its core is about combat. And like, well, it's one of those things, I have to say this to quite a few people. Like, I love games with combat in. Love it. Absolutely love them. But I made an intentional choice with Mapamundi to not do it, because and at first I was like, maybe I should put combat in. People like combat. Maybe I should put it in, but try and de-emphasize it. And I was like, well, then what? If you're going to try and de-emphasize it, don't do it.
Yeah.
Like, just stick to the courage of your convictions. And I was like, people are going to like the fact that there is no combat. Some people will see that immediately turned off. Who cares? They weren't going to play it even if there was de-emphasized combat in it. You don't make games for everyone. You make them for some people.
Right.
But like I'm working on games 2 and 3, like 3 Cell Studios games 2 and 3, like actively at the moment, both of which have combat in. But it's again, they're not games about combat. Combat is just one means of engaging in that narrative loop or resolving that narrative loop. But it's one among many options. Mapamundi just went that extra step further and just took it away.
Right. Which is a great design
loop
constraint.
still completes,
I think it's a great design constraint to have certain mechanics highlighted and other mechanics removed entirely while still having mechanics. Because I also see a lot of designers go the direction of like, everything's loosey-goosey, roll a dice, see what happens if you get high. I think that's not as fun personally, because it sort of isn't using the tools the best way, But
I get you. Yeah,
I think
it's each to their own with it, but I'm more on your side with this. It's like I need something, right? I need something to be there.
Or else why have a longer book with all of this thought into it? You could just have, sort of you could just write a novel or sit with your friends and sort of joke around, right? Yeah. But I think here you have a great sense of, you have rules that make a lot of sense and integrate well, but there is no combat throughout, which is, I think, kind of hard almost to do, because if you were D&D brained, if you're old, it's like that's so built into everything you're writing. You're like, okay, well, what if it gives you a +1? What if it gives you +1 to what? Oh, to killing goblins. And it's hard to like unlearn that almost.
I've been unlearning that through Mapamundi. Like, in the original version of the rules in the pre-release guide, there are like modifiers. There's +1s, -1s. They're gone. They're gone for the final version of the book, because it was unnecessary bookkeeping. Again, it was like, actually the rules they don't benefit from having that kind of modification stuff, because that modification stuff is so frequently about combat. And I was like, just get rid of it. It doesn't need to be in there. And so Mapamundi was mentioned on the Ludo Narrative Dissidents podcast a week or two ago, just before Christmas. And we met, oh God, my ADHD is coming to the fore. We met one of the guys there, the British guy. He designed Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, whose name entirely escapes me.
Rick Priestley.
No, I can't. I will find out. So it will come back to me at some point. But we met him at UK Games Expo, and he mentioned so Ludo Narrative Dissidents is very much about narrative games. And on there, he was looking at the pre-release guide, and he said, there's a couple of like +1, -1 kind of things in there. but like there's loads of narrative potential in there. I was like, great, they get it. And I immediately tagged him on Blue Sky and was like, thanks so much for the mention. By the way, we've stripped all that stuff out. There was like 5 or 6 examples of it, but we've just stripped it out. Yeah, I'm kind of really happy that I am unlearning again. This is our first like design. This is our first full scale TTRPG design. And we've gone, this is me, typical me, right down to the core. Rather than doing, a 40-page hack of another system, we've designed our own system from the ground up and done a 220-page book with a 70-card deck and 10 regions and all that stuff. We've kind of done it in the wrong direction, but like, we're going through that process of unlearning and then carrying that. As a designer, I'm carrying that forward into our other games, learning what does work and what doesn't work with our style and what we're trying to do with those narrative loops and carrying forward and stripping back where and when we can.
Yeah. Well, so I think that's a good turn. We could talk more about Mappa Mundi all day, but I think the main takeaway is it's cool. You can follow it on Kickstarter.
Thank you. There's
a link on the 3 Sales site. It's probably easy to find 3 Sales Studio on various social media and just Googling it and going to Kickstarter and looking at Mappa Mundi, which is, an actual term for a world map, right? In Latin.
It literally means world maps. Yeah.
So MAPPAMUNDI, so map and then world in Latin. But, I think, one other question that might be worth spending some time on is what else y'all are up to. So you and your friends and your team, and sort of what's the future. Chris, do you have any other questions or things to add? I don't want to like leave Mappa Mundi entirely. Just give George a chance to.
No, I'm also excited to hear about next steps, next projects. If that's something that y'all are talking about, don't want to.
Well, you know what, guys,
put the pressure on.
Because I'm enjoying myself so much, I'm going to give you a little bit of an insight into things that we haven't. We haven't announced them yet. We haven't announced them, but work has begun. So I will tell you as a world exclusive before we've even crowdfunded our first game, what our second game roughly is going to be. So interpersonally, I've told some people about this and some people know. I won't reveal the name of the game, but I'll give you a kind of overview of it. So I am from Essex here in the UK. So Essex, it touches northeast London, east and northeast London. So the Thames runs out of East London. Essex is above the Thames. And my family are from Ireland via East and Southeast London. And there is a place in Essex. It's now a roundabout. So I'm leaving clues for people who want to go and do their own research because I'm not going to tell you the name. But there is a roundabout in Essex on the motorway, which gets mentioned every day on traffic reports. And you grow up in Essex hearing the name mentioned every single time. It also happens to be, back in the day, the site of execution for the Royal Liberty of Havering, which is now a borough in Essex, is now a county council borough. Essex was also one of the 2 places that the 1381 Peasants' Revolt started. The other place was Kent, which is just below the Thames. And basically, our game is the subtitle is currently a place-based RPG of English radicalism, and you play as peasants and members of the lower yeomanry, so like low skilled people whose job it is in this open world setting to overthrow the state.
Oh my god, I love it.
So that's the game that I'm actively working on. So like Mappa Mundi is like done now. Mappa Mundi is done. We're just finishing the final edit. The last bits of artwork are being completed as we speak. So this is worth mentioning. Like, we are going to Kickstarter with the game finished. Like, the day the Kickstarter finishes is the day the last piece of artwork turns up, and we go to print the next day. So we're looking at like a 3-month turnaround. So I have been actively working on game number 2. And then game number 3, Jeremy, our developer and editor and my co-writer, has learned how to hack my ADHD. So set me a challenge while we were at a convention. And within 10 minutes, we'd come up with a game that's now our game number 3, which I can't tell you any more about. Because it's like... If I tell you where the inspiration came from, it will give away what the game is. But suffice it to say that it's like the challenge Jeremy gave me was, here is this thing that you really, really don't like. You really don't like it. You think it's overdone. You think it's hackneyed. You think it's an easy meal ticket. I want you to come up with a game that's like that uses that setting that you would find interesting and is in a completely unique time period. So instantaneously, I was like, this. 10 minutes later, we had the framework of the game designed. A week later, the system was in place. A rough system was in place, because ADHD is like a crazy superpower with that stuff. I can't do washing up and I can't empty the laundry, but like I can design a game in a week. So that's now game number 3. So we've got, and we have games beyond that, like game number 3 pushed out the original game number 3, which is now game number 4. So we've got a lot planned. Like, our aim, like I said, we're a small team. There's just 3 of us. We all co-own the studio, but the idea is to turn this into a business that supports us all financially and allows us to pay freelancers as generously as we can. Like we already do that as far as we're concerned. But allows us to do what we were saying with Mapamundi, which is when we do Mapamundi expansions, which we hope to do, we've got other continents to explore, that we can pay freelance writers from those regions to write that stuff. So, we have to have, like, on the business side of things, and again, I say this as like a committed hardcore anarchist, so talking about running a business is really difficult, but like there are ways to run a business in an anarchist fashion, and that tends to be about respecting the people around you and having non-hierarchical structures and all that kind of stuff. To make that sustainable, we have to have multiple games, and we have to get them out in a relatively timely fashion, and hopefully those games do well, because that then allows us to pay our people properly. And yeah, so that's where we're at. So we've got game number 2 is, a place-based RPG of English radicalism, and I will hold back if I give you the subtitle for the 3rd game, it will just tell you what the game is.
Yeah. That's okay. Let's leave some mysteries in the world. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, we have to have you back on. So
yeah, an excuse to have you back on. I do want to ask, do you know about the project, The People of 1381?
No. Oh yeah. Maybe. What is it?
It's the website is 1381.online, but it's a research project where people are taking documents around the 1381 revolt and then looking into the actual lives and biographies.
Oh no, I have seen some of these. Yeah, like
it's fantastic.
That stuff is fire, man. It's so good. I also found there was another. I was trying to work out how many the system works. It's kind of cinematically inspired as well. Like your player characters have their own retinues. So like things like The Last Kingdom or Sharp, both of those are Bernard Cornwell kind of IPs. But like the hero has a group of people around them who fight alongside them, and because you're peasants or lower yeomanry, you're not commanding whole armies.
Yeah.
So you need people who are around you, and you kind of recruit them. And again, instead of leveling up your character, you level up your trade and your job within that trade, and your retinue gets bigger or better or whatever. And I was like, I don't know how many people are in a retinue. So I found this resource about like retinues that were taken to the start of the 100 Years' War. So retinues of people who fought at Agincourt, where they came from, how many people signed the register at the same time, what weapons they carried, all that kind of stuff. Like I proper ADHD'd all over it.
Yeah.
And so yeah, like that 1381 project it's so helpful. It's so helpful.
Well, the thing that's really cool about it is it's one of the few public-facing resources that actually talks about like the daily lives of peasants at the time and like why they went on revolt and like having actual court documents about it. It's just so fascinating, and it's information that is otherwise like just kind of non-existent, which is really cool.
Well, I have questions. Also changing subjects. So again, George, if you want to keep talking about
no, I'm here.
We could do a whole show about English radicalism in the Middle Ages, which we will.
This time next year we'll do the same.
Yeah, next year.
Exactly. I think one thing you and I were talking about before we started taping, which I'm in the depths of right now. So this is very much, I think some journalism comes from sort of asking selfish questions and just seeing what people say, what experts and other folks, other working class creatives in this case. So we are trying to also, be a business and small group of creators, mostly in New York City, to make enough money to just basically make games. So we're recently moving from kind of more of a sole proprietorship, hiring freelancers to like okay, let's make a company, and how does that work? So I don't know if you could share any experiences or advice on that. And I know also with your Kickstarter, it looks like you've done well with like getting some follows for the campaign, which is really great. And so if you had any thoughts, either of those directions, sort of how do you take a game to market from like you have an idea to all the way to it's coming out and it's going to, hopefully make, big enough impact, just reach enough people who are the target audience. Because we found, to step back, like there's so much interest in tabletop physical games now, but the audience is picky and fractured and doesn't have a ton of money. So it's sort of like you really have to dig and connect with not just anyone who's listened to like Critical Role, right? Or like bought a Pathfinder book. It's like you want to find people who are kind of, in both our studio's cases, I think, inclusive leftists who like are in the NSR, right? They want to try new stuff, and they're willing to try new stuff, and they're willing to pay 10, 20, 30 bucks for it, right? And so how do you do that, and how do you do that enough to make a business? So there's sort of two questions there, but however you want to take it, I'm just kind of curious of your experience and your reflections.
Like, I love these kinds of questions because like, I have benefited from learning from a lot of people here in the UK. So the UK Tabletop Industry Network has been absolutely invaluable as a resource. Of a community. We had our Manchester hangout yesterday. It was great. Like these people, I've been going to these meetups once a month for a year now. These people are now my friends. We meet up at conventions all the time, the people who are spread out all over the country. So it's been a really, 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 really useful resource. But the thing is that it's a lot of us are doing it differently, right? Like you and I are in a relatively similar boat, but like even within that boat, we're at two different ends of it or two different sides of it. Like the products that we're putting out are kind of different because of course they're going to be different. So what I like, I suppose I would start off by caveating by saying that whatever I'm about to say seems to be working for us. We'll find out if it's properly worked in 29 days time. And then again, at the end of the month, when that kind of final Kickstarter total is there. And then again, this time next year, when I can tell you how the sales have been, hopefully tell you how the sales have been going. But like, we are an independent studio that is entirely self-funded. Like I have funded this out of my own pocket. Like I'm working 3 jobs. Like I work, the studio is a full-time job. I work a full-time project management job that pays Joel, our artist. And then I like edit academic journals freelance that pays me. And I'm kind of hoping the Kickstarter is going to allow me to stop doing one of those because then the business can start paying Joel, our artist, instead of me doing it. But like that would, we'll get to that bridge when we come to it. But, we are not putting out short games. We're putting out now rules light games, but they're not. These are 220 page books. There's a 70 card tarot deck. That means it has to come in a box to hold them both together. So I will never make another game that requires cards again because it doubles our manufacturing costs. Like Mapamundi expansions will be the only ones that have cards ever again. But like, if you want to do this, you have to talk to other people. You have to learn from other people. Other people have already made almost all of the mistakes there are to make. So talk to them and ask them. And they will everyone I've found has been more than happy to share what their mistakes have been. And if they're not happy to share them, they're not going to be giving you any decent advice anyway. So don't be upset about it. For us, we are, and because this is the thing, there's different business structures, right? Like I call us a collective. We're collectively owned, but you can have co-ops, you can have collaborative things. You could be a solo kind of business owner who only works with freelancers or, brings people in when they need and does other things. You can do things by profit share. You can do things by royalties. You can pay up front. You can pay half up front and half after the project. There's all these different ways of doing it. You need to find what works for you and works for your project. Some degree of consistency in your output, I think, is important. Now, what we are doing with 3 Sales is our games thematically are not consistent. Like they're not the same games, but they have similar, like because I'm designing them, they have similar mechanical feelings, but they're like 3 different engines for these 3 different games. But the product is consistent. They are longer form, slightly like they're not like 600 page paperweight tomes. They're like 200. Somewhere between 200 and 300 pages is going to be the kind of ideal thing, with the idea that they can be expanded if there is desire for them to be expanded. That's where our consistency comes from. But if you're like setting up a business model to publish a zine and then you want to do like 3 books for one game, like a rule book, a player guide, and the D&D style thing. Like, you're gonna need different models and different approaches for those things. So like you have to find consistency somewhere, whether that's consistency of approach, consistency of theme or mechanic, or consistency of product. That would be my kind of my advice, but I think you can develop that over time. As long as something is consistent, you can develop you can move into different forms of consistency or inconsistency over time. In terms of like building an audience, I mean, if I can bring some stuff, I can bring up some kind of numbers. Like, so our mailing list, we've done, our approach to marketing is based on email marketing, because email marketing is the only form of marketing where you have unfettered access to your audience. No platform is gatekeeping your access. So Facebook, Instagram, like, I don't know, Blue Sky, Twitter was definitely bad for this, but like artificially limiting your posts. So even the people that have specifically consented to see your things aren't shown it. Like, that sucks, and it's no way for you to build momentum and no way to market. So email marketing, i.e. creating a landing page, having people give you their email address and then you sending them, in our case, monthly emails, allows you unfettered access. And like Discord is good for that as well, because obviously it's not, but that's like a community space. That's the kind of next step. Like you engage in email marketing in order to try and then get people into your communities where you can then begin to cultivate them as an audience. And I hate talking this way, but like, unfortunately it's like the reality of the industry, as far as I understand it. So like our mailing list for Mappamundi is like, actually it's a satisfying 2,222 people at the moment. And we built that from 0. 600 or 700 of those people were from organic marketing, so conventions and people watching stuff like this and then following through and signing up. The rest have come from paid advertising, but a huge number of those people have come through into our communities. Like our Kickstarter preview page broke 500 followers earlier on today. And obviously we still got like a month left to kind of continue building that up. And that's all built into the email marketing as well. Like, marketing is horrible. It feels horrible, but actually the way that we reconcile it is we're providing a product that people want. They just don't know about it. Like, people want new games, but it's difficult to find new games. So we are using advertising to say, look, we have a new game. If you'd like it, you can buy it. If not, thanks so much for stopping by. Or come and join one of our communities, and maybe you might want it, you might not want it. But the way I balance that kind of ethically for my own kind of moral, political, ethical position is that the pre-release guides that we make for all our games are the entire game. Like, you could download that pre-release guide and never have to buy the physical product. And when we were at Games Expo, people were like, are you sure? Like, that's very generous. And I was like, well, look, my take on it is if you are generous with people, they tend to be generous back, either with their time, their attention, or their money. Ideally, all three. But if just one of those things, then that's fine. And if they were going to download it and not, like, if they weren't going to buy it anyway, it doesn't matter that they've downloaded the game, because they weren't going to buy it anyway. And if I lose some potential sales because I've given away a pre-release guide that gives you the whole game, great. You're playing the game. Like, you're having a good time. I've done a good thing. It would be nice if I got paid for it, but like, you're having a good time, and that's important as well. Like, the kind of logic behind our approach is that I want you to really know that you want to buy it. Like, when you go to a restaurant and we like, you sit down and you have a meal and you're like, my God, that was good. Like, that was really good. I really got to enjoy every part of that meal. I'm going to come back here again. Whereas if you get a tiny little sample of it, you're like, oh, like, I'm not sure if I like it or not. I'm going to have to pay to find out if I like it. And then they buy it and they don't like it. And then they're dissatisfied. And that's worse. I'd rather you not buy it than buy it, not buy it and I don't get your money, than you buy it, I get your money, but you're dissatisfied. So I want you to know you like it. So our marketing approach has been to let you know you want it. Because if you really want it, you're going to buy it. and you're going to support us on Kickstarter, and you're going to buy more things when they come out, and you're going to tell people about it. People evangelize when they're happy. And so that's what our kind of approach. That's how I kind of balance in my own mind by my own standards. That's how I balance. I'm giving money to Meta to advertise, which I don't like doing, versus I'm making a positive impact in the world by creating these play spaces and exposing people to something that I think they might like.
Yeah, I think that's such a good answer. And you know, I think we could go. We've talked about some of these themes in the past, Chris, and we could expound on some of them briefly now. But I just generally, George, I agree with what you're saying, and I think, you know, that is, I think, one of the challenges for indie creatives who are used to working in a role as vendor. Like I get paid to write stuff, Chris gets paid to illustrate stuff primarily and write. And other members of our team similarly, you know, we're mostly writers, editors, whatever, illustrators. And so how do you go to become business people, especially if you're on the left? I'm much more, you know, I'm a Marxist. I don't think there's a problem with hierarchy as such. There's a problem with who is in charge of, you know, what are you using it for? And what, you know, why do you have, you know, class is different from hierarchy, right? You could have structure.
We're cousins. I get where you're coming
cousins.
from.
Yeah. And members of our team, that's why we say we're broadly leftist, because I think there's members of our team who are more anarchist. But you know, regardless of that, I think one of the major problems just ethically is even putting sort of politics as such aside, people feel like, oh no, you know, I shouldn't be getting, you know, shilling myself, getting money, turning myself into a commodity, blah, 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 all that in scare quotes. But it's like, this is the reality of like, we live in the heart of the empire in 2025. And if we don't do these things, we're going to be working worse jobs for worse people. So if we want to work for ourselves, we have to learn some of those tools. Yeah. And I definitely agree with
there's liberation in trying to escape the system as much as you possibly can. Like you can't, you know, without a full scale overthrow or demolishment, you know, in your case, an overthrow of the system, in my case, a complete destruction of it, you cannot escape it in totality. And so I would far rather set up my own business where I can treat people equitably and fairly and give them ownership of that business and pay them well and put out environmentally conscious products that present different versions of the world than I would go and work in a fucking bank. Like that's my alternative, right? So
well, and a lot of that is like
advertising to make that possible. I will do that.
Yeah, and a lot of it's the selfishness of like, what do I want to do with the remaining years I have on the planet? And then some of it, to your point, is like not reinforcing systems of power with which we disagree. Yeah. So maybe we do have to reinforce, to your point, like we have to choose our battles. Like we're reinforcing that meta currently is where you can advertise retail commodity, you know, luxury goods, like toys, and games. Yeah. But like, and social media, you know, Blue Sky might be where we spend most of our time in terms of chatting with other designers or whatever. But like those things feel like smaller concessions than spending 8 hours a day working for a big company that we disagree with, whatever. And feeling really also just muzzled. Like I do think that is a scary thing that could happen with the sort of techno oligopoly that's emerged, is like, if they stopped letting us talk the way we want to talk, we're going to have those conversations elsewhere, and it's going to further diffuse and limit our ability to really connect with folks. But for now, you can just have this kind of parallel economy where we're just kind of creating products for people whose values we share, and that they can buy those. And you already see it on the right. I mean, I just think of all the ludicrous kind of Black Rifle Coffee type products in the United States that are by and for far-right neo-Nazis that are just openly advertised, and they're just like in this parallel world where it's like, I'm not going to buy that crap, but like I can't stop them from advertising it. So why not have games about, you know, anarchism and Marxism, essentially broadly construed, and ethical eating and all these things that are really, really fun and high quality and well made, and then just try to find people who want those. So it is a challenge. It's something that we talk about a lot and are still trying to figure out, but I appreciate you being open and honest about where y'all are at. And yeah, best of luck. I mean, hopefully
I'm like, openness and honesty is everything you get from us, like, or from me particularly, like to steal a capitalist aphorism that is normally a lie, which is a high tide raises all ships. I think in the TTRPG industry, that is actually true. Like we all benefit from other people's successes, maybe less so D&D, but like even that is like, it's bringing people in. And some of those people will go beyond that, and then they come to us. And like, our successes are our successes. My success is your success, and your success is my success, because we are creating a space. We are making a space fertile for people to grow in, right? Like, and from a business perspective, you know, we can do this at all levels, as vendors, as freelancers, as publishers, which is what, you know, because this is the thing. We're designers and illustrators, but we are also trying to be publishers as well. And those are two different hats that we have to wear, but we can all contribute to making that ground fertile and lifting each other up. And like, if I can do something for you, I feel duty bound to do it. Like, in one form or another, if you come to me and I can do something for you, I'm going to make that happen. It might take longer than you might want it to. It might sometimes might have to come at a cost because I might need to pay to do something or whatever. But if I can do it, if it is within my power to do it, I'm going to help you do that. Because like, that's just a really nice way of living. Like, I'm trying to escape this structure. You're trying to escape this structure. Let's help each other escape. Let's help other people escape as well. Like, I feel that's like right at the core of what I try to do personally in all aspects of my life. And that's no different in in my business side of things either.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't find the mute button. No, I completely agree. And Chris, I love your thoughts here. Yeah, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt because you were saying such beautiful thoughts. No, I think we do have to help each other, and I think indie designers have to both maintain. I mean, this is the hard line to walk with any, not just games, but any sort of indie leftist and or creative world where we want to have some meager ownership of some of the tools of production. And as Vex points out, you still have to engage with not only the Metas and Blue Skies, but also the MailChimps. I mean, Google, but all those things aside, we want to have more ability to publish our own work. So we want to help each other, and we want to maintain the right ethics. At the same time, we want to succeed and be able to do well enough that we are able to sort of leave the mainstream horrible. And
I will add from a positionality perspective, that is so much easier to do here in the UK than it is to do in the US for one reason, and that's healthcare. Like, the fact that you seriously, man, like the fact that we don't have to think about that, like from a financial perspective. There are problems over here with our healthcare system. There are problems with like disability access and all stuff like that. But the fact that I don't have to account for X number of hundreds or thousands of dollars a month to live, like just to survive, it's unbelievably liberating. Like, we don't have that level of financial pressure. Like, I wouldn't be doing this if I was in the US. Like, I wouldn't have taken the risk to do it. So like, there is a privilege from this side on I was about to say on this side of the world, but actually in almost all countries that aren't the US.
Yeah.
We don't have to think about that. It's huge amounts of money that we don't have to account for.
But beyond healthcare, also the cost of food and especially rent is so high, specifically in New York City, that this is probably the worst place to do it.
Yeah.
So I highly recommend, if you're an indie or if you're one of our friends, we should all just move, because it's not worth it anymore. The old New York
time
is exactly,
time, baby. Ooh.
Long gone. And so we definitely agree that there's many structural. I mean, it's not just healthcare. It's also like just setting up a business in the United States. It's really meant to be for C corps to have basically participate in oligopoly in various ways and merge and acquire one another. It's not meant to really help small and medium-sized enterprises, and it's very hard to get started without capital. And this is a luxury good industry at the end of the day. We're selling physical commodities that cost a lot to make. The margin isn't great, and people don't need them to live. So I think that's something I really respect. Our consultant, Logan Dean, we've talked about, and I just to finish the thought, but I think it's something important to say that, like, people buying these things, it is a very much a matter of respect, because you're selling them toys, and you want to make, in our case, ethically produced, high quality, really, really fun toys, but they don't have to buy
spend their hard-earned money on. Right?
Yes. And so there's a lot of respect for the buyer. And I think that is a little different than when you're selling a commodity or service that people absolutely need, or something like booze, where like they're going to buy it anyway. They may not need it, but they're going to buy it. So we're in a weird space there, just in terms of the niche, in terms of the type of thing we're selling. And then, yes, in the US, there's many structural sort of disadvantages. So please go ahead. But I just wanted to make
it was purely on the idea. So like, I completely agree with your logic, right? The idea of the luxury product, but I try as best as I can to advocate that actually I disagree with us ascribing the term luxury product to what we do, and actually to any form of entertainment. This is how people spend their free time. That's not a luxury. It shouldn't be a luxury, right? The way you entertain yourself and others shouldn't be considered a luxury, right? Like a walk in the park it shouldn't be considered a luxury. Watching a movie shouldn't be considered a luxury. Reading a book, like a paperback book that doesn't cost anywhere near as much as an RPG book, which by the way, don't cost anywhere near as much as they should to reflect the amount of work that goes into them. And that's especially true in Mapamundi's case. Like we are doing this like as cheaply as we possibly can because price is a big excessive, like growing up lower working class, price is like a real accessibility point for me. But like the way you spend your free time, the things that you use to spend your free time with shouldn't be considered luxuries, even if that's the way kind of capitalism treats them, right? For capitalism, it's a luxury. It's a luxury because it being around an RPG table doesn't contribute to the economy and actually might do quite the opposite if you're awakening people in different ways, right? But yeah, so it was purely, I agree with your logic on all counts. I just tried to reject that idea of that what we're doing are luxury products based on that idea that the way you spend your free time, which is, a significant chunk of your life, shouldn't be considered a luxury.
Well, it's partially, it's semantics, right? But it's a question of what we call in social sciences the is-ought distinction. Like it is a luxury in terms of real political economics, but it ought not to be the way you're describing it. So I agree with your ought, but I will say, I am very much a Marxist who believes in this is it. This is the world. It is a luxury. Like currently, I'll just say it. It is not it is not something people need to survive. So if they're paying us $55 for a box of books and cards and other stuff, that's they made a real choice there that we really respect. And I think we have a sort of duty to make it's hard to balance all of those things. Do it ethically, do it without any of the advantages of the big companies. Yeah. And do it in a way that respects the audience and gives them something really high quality. Because it'd be easier to just make crap that doesn't cost a lot, that we don't put a lot of time into. To your point, we put in so much time that we're not paid back for. Yeah. I think that's it's so much time. Yeah.
It really, Mapamundi, we've been working on this consistently I've worked on it every day of the week for the last nearly 18 months, every single day of the week. And I know Joel and Jeremy to varying extents have been basically close to that as well. And none of us are, Joel's getting paid, but he's getting paid far less than he would be if he was doing it on private commission. And because the idea is that we all own. So maybe to return to that, very, very briefly return to that idea of setting up your business. The way that I did it was I needed people who could work for free or for very little. And the way that I showed them I respected them and that I wanted to work with them long term and took them seriously and love them as people was to give them ownership in the business. They are working now for themselves, not for me. And that, that's the way that I was able to kind of square that circle ethically, morally, politically, whatever. Beyond the fact that I wanted them to own the company as well, because I want to work with them in the long term. But it was a way of me being this is the position that we're in. We're all pulling together. The means of production are yours and mine. Let's all reap the benefits from them.
I love that. That's very much the goal. And we're probably gonna have to leave it here just in terms of time, but we can go into more sort of what Chris and I and our team are up to on our side. But George, we really, I'm agreeing with everything you're saying there.
Yeah. And also just appreciate the transparency and openness about.
Thanks, guys. I'm always happy to come and talk about this stuff. Maybe it's all going to blow up in my stupid face in a month's time. We'll see what happens. But I'm always happy to come and talk about this stuff. So.
Well, we're following, we'll support, and yeah, we can definitely talk more in the future, and we can have you back on. Also, we should definitely give you the last word, and maybe if there's other things we didn't get to, or just things that are on your mind, we can say that. But Chris, do you have final questions, final thoughts before we hand it over to George?
No. My traditional final question is, where can we find you personally? Where can we find 3 Stillfleet Studio, and how can people get their hands on Mapamundi?
You can't really find me personally anywhere. You can find, but I run all of the 3 Stillfleet Studio social media stuff. So if you want me, you can find me there. Drop me a DM, that's fine. So you can find us on Blue Sky, 3 Stillfleet Studios, Instagram, 3 Stillfleet Studios. You can find us on Facebook, 3 Stillfleet Studios. You can also find Mapamundi on Facebook. It has its own group and page, so you can find both of those. You can find out more about Mapamundi at mapamundyrpg.com. That's our landing page for the game. You can sign up to our mailing list through that. You get my delightful monthly emails coming out. where I update you, give you all the behind the scenes stuff. You can also find links to our Discord community on there. That's where you can find me personally. Like, Discord is a great place to find me personally. My DMs are always open. And in terms of Mapamundi and how people can get their hands on it, we are launching on Kickstarter on February the 4th. If you just type in Kickstarter Mapamundi, that's MAPPA space MUNDI, you can find our pre-launch page there. Give it a note, click that notify me on launch button. We'd love to have you with us. And yeah, we'll be crowdfunding all the way through February. And like I said, the last piece of artwork is due the last day of the Kickstarter. So if we fund, which we hope we will, we are going to print literally the next day. So we're looking for like a 3-month fulfillment turnaround. So our aim at the moment, is to have books in people's hands by June. So whether or not that actually ends up happening or not is a different case. But if it doesn't happen, it will purely be because of like sea freight stuff, because the book, we're literally just waiting on the art, like to plug the rest of the artwork into the book now. So yeah, if you fancy, if you fancy a non-combat game that's all about exploring and making friends with monsters, even if sometimes they don't want to make friends with you, and you want a kind of narrative first game that you have creative agency and control over, then Mapamundi is 100% the game for you. So I hope people will consider it and come and find us and show us your support.
Hell yeah. The real monsters are the friends we made along the way.
They absolutely are, yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, I guess that is it. So anything else, George, that you want to add? Anything we didn't get to? Anything you want to plug beyond Mapamundi?
Just to thank you guys so much. Really appreciate you having us on, and for the support for the game, and also for great questions, guys. Like, really good. Like, good job. That was good stuff.
You.
Well, thanks for spending your time and letting us do our thing. We just love games, so we love it. Specifically, I should say, we love this type of sort of NSR lefty inspired, ethical,
thoughtful, mindful.
Yeah. So I'm curious to see what the reception is and how some of the play experiences are and what you learn as you're fulfilling, because that's good luck. That is a big chunk of work as well, but it seems like you know what you're doing and are really well poised. And yeah, if you can get it out in 3 months,
I know what I'm doing. Yeah.
I don't think you need to, but that's great. Like, that's sick if you can get that in 3 months. It's always better to have it all done and not be having this long final mile problem.
That stuff gives me nightmares. That stuff gives me nightmares. The idea of taking people's money and then having like a year's worth of development left to do, like that, I don't.
Oh my god, that makes me die inside to think about.
So that's why we, especially for our first game, we wanted to be like, this is the game is done. You're buying the game.
Yeah,
we just need to get it printed. So please help us get that done.
Well, congrats. And I should have said, you mentioned you've said so many good things. One of them was that you're giving away all the rules every time, and I think that's something really cool. And obviously, we're a little behind on our part with like the proper SRD, but we have free quick starts, and we're committed to free quick starts that have basically the whole rules, and then the book has
I should add
stuff, right?
I should add on that line, we are also making an incredibly permissive community license.
Great.
So people can make games using Mapamundi, including some of the artwork assets. They can make their own adventures and sell them at their own price and keep all of that money for themselves. So we're making that, like, we've already had one of our community members has already designed a quite frankly brilliant adventure. And so, we've been kind of working with him on that and getting him the artwork assets and stuff. And so, like, he's done excellently with it. And so our community license will allow people to just use the Mapamundi system to make Mapamundi adventures, publish them themselves, make the money themselves, keep the money themselves. That's what we want.
Yeah,
and
love
that's
it.
like building from the bottom up.
Yeah. No, so that lets us do Mappa Solomon Grundy and Mappa Ted Bundy and I don't know, whatever dumb funny things
Mappa
we can.
Tim, no, not
no, we're not doing that.
Why?
But yeah, so that's awesome. So thank you for putting out work that people can access, for free. They can check out, and they can get the license and make their own. And yes, hopefully they will support you going to the Kickstarter there and following the Mapamundi Exploration and Ecology RPG Kickstarter, which is going to go live pretty soon. February 4th. So with that, 4th. This has been Why We Roll. We're still rolling forward in 2025. So if you're interested in tabletop design, if you are making a game, if you want to get in touch, you can always email us at company, so co@stillfleet.com, or find us on our Discord, discord.stillfleet.com. And the best way to support the show is just head over to patreon.com/stillfleet if you like what you hear. Or our games. So Chris is working on Danse Macabre. I'm always working on sort of everything, but still, Stillfleet, the political sci-fi RPG. And this has been our interview with George Bickers of Three Sail Studios in regard to Mapamundi. Thanks. Have a lovely day or night wherever you are on Earth. And Vex, thanks for hanging in the chat as usual.
Yeah, as always. All right. Thanks so much, George. And
Thanks,
all
guys.
the links will be in the show notes. And we'll talk to y'all again soon.
All right, bye-bye.